Welcome to Serves You Right. This is Andrew, and I'm glad you can make it. If you are a server, a bartender, back-of-house warrior, this is the spot for you. Follow me as we try to work out and solve one fundamental question: whether or not you can truly be happy working in the restaurant industry. With everything involved in working in service, the alcohol, the late nights, low wages, angry guests, restaurants and bars offer a very strange blend of challenge and opportunity, let's say. They do also serve a very large and underserved population in the US. So I'm trying to answer these questions. Are they flawed and ugly in some ways? Oh yeah, but the service industry also does serve a deep and fundamental need. That drive for a fast, flexible work environment, the thrill of quick money, and, let's be honest, the appeal of the slightly dangerous for some. Again, my name's Andrew, and I've worked in restaurants for about 20 years. I've done everything from dishwashing all the way to being a general manager, and a little bit of everything in between. So this is my record of what I've learned and what's interesting to me. Follow along and see what we make of it all. Thanks for listening. Let's do it. Today we are talking to Tim, master of wine and really interesting guy. I definitely enjoyed his conversation on perceptual individualism, as he calls it, in wine. We get a little into the weeds talking about wine recommendations and his thoughts on the wine industry. We definitely cover umami and a lot of different preconceptions that people have about wine tasting. So if you're not super into wine tasting and wine science, this conversation may be a touch much for you. But I think it's a really important conversation because we get deep into his personal journey of sobriety too. How someone who is a high functioning alcoholic can turn down drinking and still work in the industry is really inspiring. One of the main reasons I wanted to talk to Tim today. So expect to learn all sorts of things about the wine industry. Expect to hear Mr. Tim curse more than I expected, and expect to hear some unfiltered and blunt takes on the world we inhabit. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you like it too. Thanks for listening. Tim.
Yes.
For the listeners out there, what is it that you do?
That's
a big question.
My wife would like to know that. I'm sort of phasing into retirement. So I turned 73 in February, and I've been at this since 1966. So there'll be I don't even want to think. So I'm a consultant for the industry. Used to do a lot of work in China for the past almost 30 years, but obviously since COVID and with the ebb and flow of life, that's gone away. But I work with wineries, wine organizations. My focus has become in two areas that I work. The pragmatic half of my bipolar nature is the business of wine. And so I'll work with wineries, restaurant operations. Used to do a huge amount of international work for all sorts of hotel restaurant chains and so forth. And then I've got a company called winebusiness.com. And we provide online, as far as we know, the only readily available wine business education program, a combination of videos and financial workbooks that are proprietary that we've created. And then with that, I'm on faculty at Washington State University and Linfield University, and work with Hong Kong Polytechnic Institute, Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and a number of other universities in their wine education uh, areas. And then the second half of what I do is evolved from a dissonance I've always had with wine and food pairing to actually a study of perceptual sciences. So it and perceptual sciences being defined as how sensations in our sensory system actually create our perspectives, our opinions, the meaning that we have of the universe, including wine. Uh, and the area of my focus is how vastly different two individuals can be, regardless of their education and their training and so forth. So I look at the genetics, what's called the neural pathway conditioning uh, that that creates positive or negative response to stimulus over time. So how we acquire tastes and how we dispose of tastes, uh, and that kind of stuff. Neuroplasticity, which is learning and actual changes of in the brain, and then psychology. So those are the four areas that make us all unique in what we perceive. But in the context of wine, it really goes a long way to answer why even experts can't agree on crap. It's just everybody. Oh, my palate's the best palate, and we all have to learn the right words to use and so on and so forth. But just this research alone crashes the whole wine and food pairing bullshit, if I can use that word. You
Oh
can
yeah,
bleep me out if
please.
needed be.
No, you're among friends here. You can use any of the
So,
words.
anyways, that's kind of what I do.
Okay. So yeah, that is one of the things I wanted to touch. I'm glad you did that right away. So this phrase I hear from you and some of your interviews, perceptual individualism.
Yes.
And so that is the area that you've been focusing on. So are we doomed then? Is there no right answer when it comes to wine?
Well, here's the fascinating thing. Nobody's doomed.
Mhm.
In fact, the opportunity just kind of explodes.
Mhm.
Um, from what you've learned in your wine education and so on, have you ever had any section of anything is, okay, now we're actually going to learn about the perceptual system and our perceptual differences and how to accommodate people that don't understand the complex language and the metaphors and the BS that
Mhm.
the descriptive language. Um, have you ever seen anything like that in any wine education program?
Wine education, no. On the streets, hand-to-hand combat, yes.
Yes, yeah, because
Yeah.
because other people apply this way. What my work affords the possibility is it can be called adaptive communications. So just from spending a couple of minutes with a person or even moments at a table side, because oh, that wouldn't work, and it would. Everybody comes up with the reasons why we shouldn't change and why we shouldn't adapt as an industry. And this is the biggest problem facing the industry now is we haven't adapted to young consumer needs. Um, there's no conversation with the consumer. It's, oh, what food are you having? Oh, then you should have this wine. Well, what kind of crap is that? You don't even know what the person likes. And what we've done is we've intimidated consumers to the point, the ones that really would like some help would rather lie than tell you what they like,
Mm.
especially sweet wine drinkers. So,
Oh yeah. No, I'm not going to admit to liking Moscato, even if I do.
yeah, but here's the funny thing. If you ask a Moscato drinker what wine they like, they'll make a bad face about the wine they like.
Mm.
But what you don't know and what you've never been taught is somebody liking Moscato or White Zinfandel is one of the number one ways to determine they have the most friggin' taste buds. They're
Ah,
not
super
immature, they're
taster.
not
Ah.
stupid. We're the dumbasses because we've created this thing. Oh, Americans like Coca-Cola or like sweet wine because they grew up on Coca-Cola. But in all your education, and you can't find this in any of the text in WSET or Master Psalm materials, up until about 100 years ago in France, French champagne, as it was consumed in France, was 30% sweeter than Coca-Cola.
Oh yeah. Well, and
And
I will say my wife is Russian, so
uh,
the
yeah,
czars of
and
Russia too. It was even more. Yeah.
300 we
Oh.
figured Russian champagne was like a lava lamp. There's a big bubble, you'd open it and go bop. At 300, that's 30% sugar.
Mhm.
And that was the Russian standard. So, and then we've got this language that is just absolute bullcrap.
Mhm.
Dry wine is a relative term, but even technically today, dry champagne, sec, technically, legally, is somewhere in the neighborhood of I think 1.8 to 3.2% residual sugar.
Mhm.
Extra dry, talk about confusing, is the next level. Then brut, which was a French way of mocking the English for wanting dry wine because the French wanted it sweet. And so we've created this frickin' mess. And what's been lost is the conversation with the consumer without absolutely asinine, ridiculous judgment of their opinions. We have become an industry of inhospitality because there's nothing about the consumer involved in any of the education or the program. So it's us telling people what they should like and why they should like it based on false information. And then we wonder why we've got a global problem.
Mhm. And
And I
why?
see my soapbox. I'm
Oh,
standing on my soapbox.
you brought it today. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I keep seeing these trends that younger people basically aren't drinking anymore. I wonder how much of that happens to be health consciousness and how much of it is just, how can you sort head to tails out of any of this?
Well, the wine industry, ever since I've been in it, we absolutely suck at being able to forecast consumer trends because we don't understand consumers. Go figure. If you went into a phone store, what would you expect when you say, "Hi, I'm looking for a new phone"? What would you want?
Yeah. What would you like?
Well, no, I mean
Yeah.
seriously.
No, no, I would expect someone to say that or like
Right?
what are you planning? Are you thinking iPhone? Are you thinking
Yeah,
Android? Yeah.
what are the and what features would you like?
Mhm.
Because that's going to help you determine the macro decision, iPhone or Android, right? And
Mhm.
then so there's a very specific decision tree. You don't walk into a phone and store and somebody starts to tell you what you should have and how it works and the history of it and the chips that are in it and whatever. They have a discussion. How are you going to use it? What features are most important to you? How important is the camera? Uh, what kind of apps are you going to use, et cetera, et cetera? What kind of interface do you like? Do you prefer Android? And there are geeks, there are people that have strong opinions that and they carry around the judgment, oh, you're an Android user, or oh, whatever. But there's no consumer product in the world that I know where the industry is so abjectly stupid and ignorant about the people who they're selling to. So
Mhm.
how's
Well,
that?
oh, most of the listeners to the show are service industry. So my thought here is, I think back to 15 years ago when I was starting, and the best thing that I could do was memorize a few facts about some wines, and when asked, kind of spit it out. And so I'm wondering for that new server or bartender, where do you start? Or, wine is such a big world that
Yeah.
it's almost hard to get in there. What would you recommend to that new server or bartender?
So my vision for the world,
Mhm.
which will never be realized because I'm almost dead already, um, it should start with perception.
Mhm.
So imagine you go into a wine tasting and say, okay, we've got six wines here. We've got a sweet white, we've got a dry white wine, and we've got a dry white wine that's higher alcohol and sort of oaky.
Mhm.
And then we're going to do three red wines, and one's going to be light and not very high in alcohol and so forth. And then we're going to have a sort of middle intensity, and then we're going to have some big ass red that's really strong and intense. And where we're going to start actually, though, is we're going to take you through a little process. This is called phenotyping. It's from the word phenotype, but we want everybody to understand where you fit in the perceptual world, and then pay attention to how different everybody in this class is. Because when you go out on the floor, you're going to have people of every walk of life, all levels of sensitivities, and so on and so forth. And so there's simple tests. I can start with you. And the first question is, how much do you like salt, Andrew?
I would say I'm probably bottom quartile. Like, I do not enjoy too much salt. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know anybody who does love salt to the point?
Oh, without a second thought. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'd like to tell you, whenever you meet somebody who's grabbing the salt shaker, they haven't even tasted their food, say to them, wow, I just learned that that is the number one sign of having the most taste buds, and that you experience bitterness at a level other people can't comprehend.
Mhm.
And I and you should know that, because I know people give you a hard time about your preference, but that's actually what's going on with your salt preference.
Self-medication, essentially.
No, it's like putting sunglasses on when
Mhm.
you're out in bright sunlight.
Well, yeah, I meant more like self-correction. You don't want to
Oh,
taste
correction,
those,
yeah.
yeah, taste
They
those better.
know
Mhm.
they need the salt. And there you've probably, I'm guessing, had no education or training on actually why salt is in food and the role that it plays with wine.
Mhm.
And so take the bitter pill with a grain of salt if you want to go back centuries.
Mhm.
Next time you get a chance, put a little salt and lemon juice on your hand, some strong tannic wine, sip the wine, lick your hand, try the wine, smooth as silk.
Mhm.
That's why
Mhm.
they're doing it. And people don't add salt because they like the taste of salt. They can't taste the food until they get past the bitterness.
Okay.
And this is very well documented in research. This is out in science, but we're clueless. We'd rather say, "Oh, you're killing the food. You're embarrassing me." Well,
Mhm.
shut the hell up. We need to just get smarter. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, in your let me ask you a second question. What happens when you have artificial sweetener, especially
So
the old ones, like
you're talking like little Splenda in my coffee, that sort of thing.
yeah, but the older version, Splenda was actually created because it doesn't have a certain characteristics of perceptual diversity. Um,
Okay.
have you ever had like aspartame, or the pink or the blue?
Pink. I don't. I may not have. Honestly, I usually don't have sugar in
That
my coffee,
don't
so
do it
that's
anyways, right?
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and how's Splenda or how's stevia for you?
I've never had it. I
Never had
don't drink
stevia?
sweetened. Yeah, I don't do the
Okay.
sweetened coffee. Sorry,
No, no, no,
I'm a bad
that's fine.
example
But
here.
again, this is part of the conversation. What you'll find though is if you ask people, uh, uh, there's a large percentage of people when they have artificial sweetener, it's this horrible, metallic, disgusting experience.
Mm.
And for other people, it's sweet.
Weird.
And
So
and so how do you rationalize that? But the reason we ask the question is this is part of a process. With your clothes, do you ever find tags irritating? Do you have to buy tagless clothes or cut out tags?
I never have. Yeah.
Never have. Okay, good. No,
No.
this is perfect.
Mm.
Um, and then in your coffee, do you ever put a little milk or creamer?
I do cream. Cream, low
Okay,
fat
good.
cream. Yeah.
Um, how much do you like or dislike Starbucks coffee?
I have done Starbucks coffee. I haven't had one probably in 5 years, but there was a period when I was in college I did it probably
Okay,
once a day.
and no
Yeah.
problem with that.
Not at all.
Okay, great. So you're very likely what we call a tolerant phenotype.
Okay.
Now, here's a challenge. You're going to think there's a judgment in here, and there isn't.
Hmm.
Tolerant phenotypes have less taste buds, and that's a good thing.
Hmm.
It's not a bad thing. Tolerant phenotypes have less tactile sensitivity. They have certain traits, they have certain behaviors associated with the perceptual world that they live in. You wouldn't happen to be colorblind, would you? Do you know?
No, no, I can
No,
see
okay.
color. Yeah.
Because it's 10% of men are color. A lot of people go through life never knowing they're colorblind,
Hmm.
but the highest percentage are in the group that you're in. All right.
I
Now
had a
let's,
friend in college who was colorblind, so I got to
yeah,
see the test and I was like, wow, you can't see that word in there, huh?
exactly.
Well, okay. There it is.
Uh, you're very unlikely to have this, but you know how some people hate cilantro.
Hmm.
Okay.
So,
So that's a genetic variation. It's a genetic cluster called OR6A2.
oh, and it tastes soapy.
And if you have that genetic cluster, a speck of it is abjectly disgusting.
Hmm.
And yet people, and the whenever I do groups, the people who love salt love me. The people who hate cilantro love me because I get their world, but other people don't. So the people who have the OR6A2 are constantly, oh, you haven't tried cilantro. Try my recipe. You'll learn to like it. I learned to like it. That's bullshit. They never will. And it's
Hmm.
not a matter of their palate being mature or this or that. They have a genetic variation that makes it taste like soap.
Yeah. Well.
And how are you going to adapt to that? Julia Child had it. If there was a speck of cilantro in her food, she would send it back and she would say, "You should be a little bit more clear about what goes into a dish on your," because it was inedible.
Yeah.
So there are hundreds and very likely thousands of these variations, and individuals can have one and not the other, and this and that. They're the general sensitivities. Some people have 500 taste buds, other people have 12,000. And the people who have 12,000 are the ones that think they have no taste buds because they've learned this is the neural uh, 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 channel conditioning in brain plus. They've been told, oh, you put too much salt on your food. You must have no taste buds. They can't find the descriptors for wine because they're getting so much input. They're getting like up to tenfold the sensory input. So it makes it hard to single out and articulate certain things because some people are hearing individual notes and then other people it's just white noise or pink noise
Yeah.
and
When you hear the symphony, can you pick out the one violin player? Yeah.
yeah,
Second
exactly.
seat. Yeah.
And you may be able to be trained to do that. So that's a perfect analogy. Okay, no, now I know what the violin tastes like. Now I know this. But what we've adopted in wine is metaphorical descriptors, the plums and the blueberries. This is a bold wine. A heavy wine, what does that really mean? Because if you take your a Moscato and pour Cabernet into it, the Cabernet will float. Moscato weighs more than Cabernet because of the specific gravity of the sugar, and it's lower in
Cool.
alcohol. The higher the alcohol, which has a much lower specific gravity, the more the
Mhm.
clear separation. So
Cool.
heavy wine is a contronym. It means
Mhm.
exactly opposite of what the word means. Heavy means weighs more. A dry wine is what kind? What do you mean? A wine is wet. So that's a contronym because wine isn't dry; it's wet.
Mhm.
And then on the whole sweetness thing, that's a train wreck because we haven't been taught a proper and industry standard way to describe what a dry wine is. And people will naturally think a tannic wine is a dry wine because of the loss of lubricity in the oral cavity by the
Mhm.
denaturing of proteins. And then we take our metaphors and we put them all together. And so I I demand that you do this and anybody who watches this. Cook a steak rare, nice nice and fatty ribeye, New York strip, whatever the hell you want, no seasoning whatsoever. And you can put a little canola oil on it or something to keep it from sticking. Taste the wine, try the fat, taste the wine. It gets more bitter and more astringent. The whole premise of red wine and red meat is absolute bullshit. Absolute. Try the protein. Oh, so the fat coats your mouth and does this, and the because of colloidally suspended phenolics being denatured by uh, proteins in winemaking, right? Egg white fining, that kind of stuff. We've extrapolated that as pseudoscience to protein in the mouth, and that if you have the steak, it'll restore that. It doesn't. Sip of wine, rare piece of steak, sip of wine, it gets more bitter and astringent. It's complete bullshit. Put salt on it, guess what? Reduces the bitterness of stringency. Has nothing to do with the steak. And Moscato lovers, Riesling lovers, and for centuries in regions around the world where maybe only white wine's grown or sparkling wine or whatever, they've had steak with their wines and nobody's ever complained. It doesn't overpower it. It's not this
Mhm.
metaphorical military, you're going to kill the wine or kill the food. We've made all this shit up. And you didn't know that, did you?
You know, the thing I'm most surprised about is that steak experiment. So I do want, in my head, I'm thinking, is it really the salt that it's always been reacting with? And I'm clearly you've done it before, so I
Well,
wish I had a steak right
I've done
now.
it with
Oh yeah.
thousands of people. I've done it. I've been doing this. So after I passed the Master of Wine exam in 1990,
Mhm.
I had a couple things going on in my life. I was working at Behringer. I was a global ambassador. Jancis Robinson had had actually proclaimed me the guru of wine and food pairing. But deep in my heart, I knew something was really wrong in all this crap. And I knew I could sit down with experts and taste a wine, and one person literally saying this is the best they'd ever had of this type of wine, and a person the same exact day, two masters of wine sitting across from each other, actually in Rutherford, California. One proclaiming this is best of its type, and the other saying, "Are you kidding? This is not even commercially acceptable." So how do we then rationalize just the wine? And then you throw the wine and food into the mix, and one person, oh, I'm getting this clash. They're not harmonizing, and another person's having this miraculous epiphany of wine and food magic.
Mhm.
How do we do it? So I passed the Master of Wine exam. I was getting divorced. Um, I was getting ready to marry the singer in my rock Motown band. We've been married now, what, 32? Oh, hell. Day after tomorrow, it'll be 30.
Oh,
3 years,
happy anniversary early.
32 years, which is also my sobriety birthday, 32 years.
Mhm.
I wonder if there's a
Congratulations.
correlation there, but we can get that. And and so I passed the master wine exam. I said, you know what? I've got the credential now. I'm going to see if I can run down the sciences and why people can't agree. And also, I am a gastronomy trivialist. I've been reading Larousse Gastronomique. It's in my bathroom just next door here on the table. Their advice was pair the wine to the diner, not the dinner. So when you're serving the Lafitte and the Côte Rôtie and the this and that, or if the guests prefer the sweet wines, the Sauterne, the Barsac, Rhone wines, which all used to be sweet prior to World War II, all the white Rhone wines. But we've lost all that, and unfortunately, the more things progress, the less of this that's going to get passed on to generations like you.
Mhm. So, can it be that simple? If you drink what you like and eat what you like, you'll be happy, or?
And understand what's called, and this is a technical term, understand that shit happens, which is it's called sensory modulation.
Hmm.
Okay. Sensory modulation is the rising and the falling of sensitivity to something, easily demonstrated by the idea of brushing your teeth and drinking orange juice.
Mhm.
Have you done that?
Only once.
How'd that go?
It's not pleasant.
When you have sweet wine or sweet food and dry wine, you will get dependent upon how dry the wine is, how much bitterness and astringency, against how sweet the dish is, you will get sensory modulation. So, how's my Moscato going to be with this, you know, mahi mahi with pineapple mango relish? Well, that's going to be dependent on two things. One, what's the flavor profile of the Moscato? Is it a sweeter one, lower alcohol? Shit, you're going to be fine. But try that with, oh, I had a Central Coast Chardonnay with this tropical fruit, so it pairs per. So wine and food pairing is just this total bullshit thing that goes on in our heads with metaphors and whatever. That sets up what's called a confirmation bias, so that if you're an expert, you go, "Oh yeah, I'm getting it," whether you are or not. You're making it up in your fucking head, and it's just this la la land. But the Moscato drinkers seriously enjoying their Moscato with it.
Hmm.
And if have you ever heard of the chef Jeremiah Tower?
No, it doesn't sound familiar.
Look him up. He was the first chef at Chez Panisse in Oakland, credited with inventing California cuisine and whatever. And 30 years ago, he had a restaurant in San Francisco called Stars, and I had taken him through the whole basic program that didn't have a lot of the sciences back 30 years ago, but I understood the modulations and the drivers. And he said, "Oh, I can do this with all my food." And that was one of his signature dishes, was mahi mahi with a mango pineapple salsa. And and so you get to do this also. Next time you make a marinara sauce, even if it's out of a can or whatever, take the wine you want to serve, take a sip, take a little bit of the sauce, try the wine again. If it gets more bitter and acidic, just put in a little bit of lemon juice or balsamic for some acidity, add just a teeny titch more salt, and the wine will become smooth.
Right. Yeah.
And
And you get
and,
to
and
try
the
marinara.
problem, and the food will taste better also. That's the other bonus of all this BS.
I am glad that you brought up the lemon juice and the acidity because that was actually the next thing I was going to ask you about. You're talking salt, flavors, bitterness. I have heard that if you're betting on one thing, to bet on acidity. Is that a more reasonable guide in your mind, or no?
No.
It's yeah.
How can you say that when you don't know the person?
Mm. Oh yeah, yeah.
So what you're going to find is, and pay attention. If you want to do a follow-up, text me. Anybody out there want to text me? I don't care. 707-337-0327.
Yeah. Not enough
Um,
people listen, so you won't be flooded or anything.
that's right. Um, but 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 here's what happened in the 90s. Number one, so I passed the Master of Wine examination. I was working for Behringer, uh, that was very quietly and wonderfully owned by Nestle, the big bad giant. And I was looking at research by mostly wine and food interested parties at UC Davis and whatever. And I found the research BS. So I started to I because of the association with Nestle. I was director of international business development for Behringer, and I started seeking out sensory scientists, and I ended up that I would not work with any sensory scientists involved with wine because their biases are already so great that their work is useless. So there are a lot of well-known wine sensory scientists who hate my guts. But one of the things that I kept hearing about, and you've heard about now, it's called umami, right?
Oh yeah.
Did you know that I am the one who actually introduced the concept out of the scientific community into general knowledge in Western culture?
No, no. Tell me about that.
I am the Swami of umami. So, in my book, Why You Like the Wines You Like, the appendix on umami was actually written by the scientist, Dr. Stephen Roper. He and his wife at University of Miami found the human receptor responsible for umami taste. So that's how deep this shit goes. So I knew that sweetness created a modulation that increased bitterness and astringency in wine and decreased fruitiness, smoothness, and whatever. So that's predictable and so forth. I knew in the early 90s that Bob Mondavi used to call it Tim's tequila trick. Hey, get some lemons and salt over here. I want to show you all something. And that's the lemon and the salt. And that creates the opposite. And you can actually create what's called flavor balancing in your food by leveling it out. But then still serve some lemon and salt on the table and stuff so that people can adjust it to their own preference. All right. So so something was going on with certain seafoods, with certain vegetables, with ripe cheese versus fresh cheese, and I had made some inroads with some really top individuals at Monell Chemical Sensus Center in Philadelphia, and within the Nestle scientific end of things. And also at UC Davis, a guy named Michael O'Mahony, pronounced Omani, is Irish. And something was happening, and this word umami kept coming up. And I'd literally ask, what's umami? They say, never mind, because it was just too arcane to explain and whatever. So I found that I could do a sensory science search of umami through the Nestle portal to the largest food science database in the world. And I requested recent research on umami taste.
Mhm.
And this was before the internet was invented. I got the stack of papers, and the top one, the first one I read was seasonal fluctuations of glutamate levels and palatability in sea urchin gonads. I was hooked. I thought, this is fun as shit. And by the way, that's uni. Uni is sea urchin
Mm.
gonads.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes.
So, so when I found out what umami was, and over the course of many years, umami taste comes from a combination of glutamate, levatory glutamate, which is natural. A 150-pound human is 4 pounds of glutamate. Your brain won't work without it. It's a neurotransmitter, all right? And boy, back 30 years ago, there was so much BS and false information about glutamate. And then the second part of glutamate is called nucleotides, five prime ribonucleotides. When you put glutamate nucleotides together, you get a huge increase, almost tenfold increase in umami taste. Parmesan cheese has glutamate, anchovies has nucleotides. Combine them, you get umamirama.
And
So
you get
there's
a
a
Caesar salad. Yeah.
big gastronomy thing. Even if you don't like anchovies, you like enough of it to synergize the crystals of amino acids in the Parmesan cheese, which are primarily glutamate. All right. But so there's all these condiments from to ketchup. So often there's sweetness and almost always salt in the condiments, like Thai fish sauce and ketchup with the sweetness and whatever. But umami taste humans crave. It's probably the most important taste we can recognize. Okay. Uh, when you have high levels of umami taste in food, the 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 modulation of the wine flavors is similar to sweetness. And if you have umami and sweetness, it's even more of an unpleasant modulation.
Mm. Okay.
So guess what vegetable do you think is supposedly the enemy of wine most often?
I'm going to go with asparagus.
Okay. Highest in glutamate.
Asparagus?
Yeah. So if now 90 to probably 95% of people have absolutely no negative reaction with the wines they love, whether it's Cabernet or Moscato or anywhere in between, with asparagus. So there's really no problem in the first place, but a small percentage of people will get an unpleasant bitterness and increase in tannin. A drop of lemon juice and a titch of salt, and it's gone in the first place.
Hmm.
Excuse me, what's the problem? You've had fresh brie, right? And it's sort of the texture's not as good, the flavor's not there, but let it sit out and start to ooze and gets really wonderful and gooey. The fresh brie is known to cause very little modulation with wines. The ripe brie and cheeses like it create a very intense modulation for many people. And guess what? The primary flavor differences between the two, while that brie is undergoing its changes, it's creating nucleotides that are synergizing the glutamate, giving it stronger umami taste, and that's why it's changing.
Okay.
Parmesan doesn't have that, even though it's aged a long time, because of the high salt content. Brie has a much lower salt content. So Parmesan typically has a self-neutralizing element, the salt, that prevents it from being as reactive. And on and on and on and on. And again, so we argue and we proselytize and we tell people what they should like and shouldn't like. We have no ability to listen, but we're the ignorant ones. They're not uneducated or ignorant or unsophisticated. We are. We're the problem.
Okay. So how do we get out of this pickle?
I
What?
don't know. I
No.
bet you should have been around 30 years ago. I mean, literally, people would walk out of presentations when I talked of Umami. They
Hmm.
would get angry. This is bullshit. This is, and on the early days of the internet, the the threads and oh, this is stupid. There is no
Here
such
goes Tim
thing.
again. Yes.
Yeah, exactly,
Oh
exactly.
yeah.
And this is at
Yeah.
the Society of Wine Educators, the global flavor and sensory conferences that I would be keynote speaker. I would actually speak on umami, which is a lot of people think they know what umami is, and a lot really don't, but they teach about it. So it comes from a Japanese word meaning good, umai. It's probably the Zen word all the way back to oneness with the universe, which is being in the womb, and is the core word umami comes from the Arabic and the Sanskrit for the word mother, mama, uma thurman, uh, umai, which is the word for mother in a lot of the Middle East and in two-thirds of Africa. Uma Thurman, did you ever see Kill Bill?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Uma Thurman is named after Uma, who was the Arabic goddess of all goddesses, mother of all mothers. So umami was coined in 1908 and presented by Dr. Ikeda in Japan as a fifth primary distinct taste and has now been widely adopted as such. So, anyways, that's more than anyone needs to know about umami. Actually, no, it's what everybody should know about umami.
What everyone should, yes.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that we could talk about wine all day. There is one thing I did want to ask you about if I can. A lot of my conversations over the last couple months have revolved around alcohol in the food service industry and how difficult it is to live and work in an industry that kind of spits you out onto the streets at 1 a.m. and the only thing open is a dive bar.
I know
And
them.
I found you actually through a story done on you and how you'd given up drinking even though you're so involved in the world of wine. And I was just wondering how you came to be in that position and what you might tell people who are also asking, am I drinking a little too much or, how do I have longevity in this business?
Yeah, got it. So, I have to be very, very careful with this and very responsible with this because I'm not a counselor.
Hmm.
It's fascinating that especially the neurological conditioning and neurotransmitter end of my work has a lot to do with this.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, oh, I know it is cool. And so number one, there is life after alcohol. All right. And it's usually not easy to get there, but it is possible. All right. So the second thing is if you're wondering, seek professional help. You know, it, probably even worse than all the bullshit of wine language and wine values and opinions and stigmatizing consumers and so forth. Even worse in the whole wine and food train wreck is the stigma attached to being an alcoholic.
Hmm.
And it's perhaps less than when I started, certainly not, as anywhere close to the stigma of when my dad, uh, tried unsuccessfully to seek recovery. But the stupid stigma that it's a weakness, it's this and that. People still believe that, and they should be taken out and stoned or something. Not that kind of stone, but maybe apples or tomatoes. Um, for me, I have three neurological things going on. One, I'm dyslexic,
Hmm.
so I transpose things differently in my head. Many people are. There's degrees of severity of dyslexia, but it's a learning disability. And why I bring that up is from grade school on, uh, I was checked out of learning. I was a horrible student. I had to find coping mechanisms because in the 60s, uh, dyslexia wasn't a known thing. But people, from first grade, 1 + 1 = 2. I'm not seeing them in that order.
Mhm.
And see Jane run, see Dick run. Uh, how do you get that out of
Mhm.
I don't get that. Uh, and so I became the class clown and a pain in the ass. And I'm not stupid. I just
No, I
my
mean, for
brain
the
just
listener, if you've never heard of Master of Wine, it's one of the world's hardest certifications.
yeah.
Honestly,
And
yeah.
and I got it.
Exactly.
Um, and I was the first American in history. Joel Butler and I were the first two Americans in history to do it.
Mhm.
So, anyways, the second thing is I'm ADHD, if you haven't kind of guessed already. And so my brain goes at a different rate, but because also this gets into perceptual individualism, and this is what having the most taste buds and being at the high end of perceptual sensitivity is not necessarily a good thing. Because you and I are talking, and if a roadrunner goes by my window, I see it. And I can be looking directly at you, and all of a sudden my attention is diverted for this or that or whatever. And so my ability to carry a thought is very short-lived because I'll start on something. When I'm autographing my books, somebody will say something and I forget how to write my name uh, because I get distracted. So anyways, that's two. And then the third thing is this is non-professional, non-research, but pretty plausible. Everybody's bipolar to some degree. Some of us are more and less. All right, in the degree of the hyperexcitement, the degree of depression, the manic and depressive kind of dynamics. And I'm perhaps a little bit more than others. So I get really fired up and then I can't move, kind of a thing. All right. So I've always sought out things that work with the way my brain works or doesn't work and whatever. When I was 14, my dad would let me have little bits of wine. This is his Chêne de Rôdesseurs certificate from 1967, growing up in Miami. And I found, wow, okay, my dad's an alcoholic, his dad's an alcoholic. Um, and I was allowed to have wine. And I started to study it. I started to read wine books uh, because I didn't have to take a test on it, and because I could sort of flip around and whatever, and I could get a buzz on. So somebody might have guessed, okay, your dad's an alcoholic, your mom's an alcoholic and bipolar, your granddad was an alcoholic. Maybe there's a problem here with a 14-year-old learning how to say Volnay so he could go buy wine in a liquor store, because back then, if you could pronounce a two-syllable Burgundy, you would never get carded.
Mhm.
And I also started cooking when I was 15, pretty much. So I'm reading French gastronomy in cookbooks. I'm cooking. The wine was a thing. And when I was 15, I decided I wanted a career in wine. And when I was 18, I actually got a job in the kitchen at Burns Steakhouse in Tampa, Florida. I dropped out of college to go to work at Burns, the largest wine list in the world. Came back. So I worked 10 years professionally as a chef, which is also a great place to hide for
Mhm.
hypersensitive, ADHD, bipolar people.
Oh yes, I've talked to many chefs on this show,
And so is the
that's,
floor.
oh
And
yep.
in my research about perceptual individuality, we're able to actually create segments of people to show why they behave, why they have the attitudes, why they have the opinions they do. And people in the hospitality industry typically are in much more of the hypersensitive range. They can't
Mhm.
stand being in an office. The best ones thrive in the chaos and whatever. But anyway, so back to this. So so that's what I've done, and for a very, very, very long time. And uh, I was a high functioning alcoholic, drinking probably 3 bottles of wine a day, 3 packs of cigarettes. Um, and knowing about wine wasn't an in thing when I started into it. So it also gave me, look at me, I'm special kind of shit. That's another trait of alcoholics, thinking we're special. So 1989, I was one of the most epic failures in the history of the Master of Wine program. And I went to a writing seminar and went to the wrong one for 3 days. Spent 3 days in disruptive innovation and critical thinking for electrical engineers. Shattered my world. Next year, I passed the Master of Wine exam. I got divorced from my alcoholic wife of 14 years, who I loved to death, but knew, that was never going to work. And I married the singer in the rock Motown band I was playing in. And through some things that she had done pertaining to her previous husband, who was a drug and addiction recovery therapist who never recovered, who died of his disease. And I mean, that's how ridiculously insidious this shit is.
Mhm.
I got up one day in 1992 and I said, yeah, 1993, I said, I'm going into recovery. And you'd think, what a great decision. She goes, what, are you crazy? You're a master of wine. You can't quit drinking. I said, I've got to. So long story short, I checked into a recovery program and I made the decision for the first time in my life, I was going to follow the rules. I was going to do what I was told to do. And if you're going into recovery and you try to wiggle on that and, oh, well, I'll find the best program that works for my life and whatever, you're probably not going to last too long. So I went into my recovery program. I had just been elevated to director of international business development at Behringer. Uh, I was on the stage with my wine and food nonsense and my master of wine thing. So I was traveling all over the world, and I had and have an absolute commitment that I do not drink.
Mhm.
And there you go. So it's now December 16th will be 33, 30, 32 years, 33, 30. Who would
Yeah.
think that, right?
Yeah.
Um, I had to change who I was hanging around with because alcoholics tend to, you know, and whether they're painters or doctors or whatever, that were in the wine industry or that were in hospitality is very rarely the cause of being alcoholic. We're there because we are alcoholic. And if we had become an airline pilot or an insurance salesman or a day laborer, we probably would have been an alcoholic also.
Mhm.
And there's many different forms. Most prevalent form of alcoholism that I'm aware of is a neurotransmitter uh, issue where the neurotransmitters that suppress pain and have you feel normal. If you start to have external forms of medication and suppression and whatever, prescriptions and alcohol and so forth, the brain stops producing those neurotransmitters.
Mm.
And so you say, oh, I'll not drink for a couple days. Your brain's going, oh yeah, yeah, you're going to, yeah, because you're going to feel like shit
Distress
until you do. You're going to
signals.
wake up
Yeah.
feeling like shit. You won't feel any better. And I'm not going to give you help anymore. The only way you're going to get it is from your alcohol or your pills or whatever. And so that begins a cycle and a cycle of behaviors and whatever. So it's really, if you feel you or someone you know and love or care about, screw the stigma.
Mm.
Confront a person, say, I love you, I care about you, and you really need to seek some help. And in 2008, I was written up in the Wall Street Journal in a big article about my recovery. And I get calls from you and from all around the world. And I'm glad if you think you seriously have a problem and are seriously thinking about recovery, call me. If it's a loved one, I talked to somebody in New Zealand about their son who's a winemaker and
Mm.
who had somehow stumbled across my raggedy story. And they said, so I'm glad to talk about it anytime. There are thousands of us in the industry, winemakers and notable wine people. Some I can disclose, many I can't. But there is a way to do it. But it really and by the way, if you're drinking or using, don't call me. Only call me if you're sober or
Mm.
straight. 707-337-0327. And and this also helps me. This is part of my giving back to the program that saved my life.
No,
Yeah,
it's a huge thing, and
it is.
I've had friends, I've had loved ones, I've seen people pass away, and I've yeah, old
Yeah.
bosses and coworkers, and it doesn't stop.
Well, and for me, the biggest thing that I had going into my recovery was my relationship, which I had already actually decided it was over, and this is with my current wife. And thank God it wasn't over because she's the woman of my dreams. And I was with my recovery counselor. He says, uh, and I was doing what we all do in recovery. And I know time wise we're getting a little short, but I said, can I go back? If I have years of recovery, can I go back to drinking? He says, okay, well, let me ask you this question. How are you doing in relationships? And we had already determined I never had a functional relationship in my life up to that point. All right. And I always sought out people who used or were alcoholic or whatever. It's part of our little net safety net. We do that. I just declared bankruptcy the year before I passed the Master of Wine examination in my first marriage. Uh, and things were generally in shambles, but I was high functioning. I'm now a Master of Wine. And he said, okay, so I said, if I get my relationship in order, get my finances, can I go back to drinking? And he goes, why the hell would you? Why, if for the first time in your life you actually had your life was working, why would you even risk it? I said, oh shit. I figured you'd have a good point.
Yeah.
And then the second question was, can I still work in the business?
Mm.
He says, the long and short of it is you're going to work in some business and you're an alcoholic. Um, so what if I were to tell you you couldn't work in the wine business? I said, well, I cook. I am a relatively smart guy. I could find something, to do. He said, the way you answered that question gives some measure of you might be able to. And I said, what do you mean the way I answered? He said, well, you didn't seem to like, oh, I have to work there. You didn't seem to defend it. If you're willing to give up working in the industry for your sobriety, then you might have a chance working in that. But it would be an absolute, not a maybe, not a, oh, I'd think about it. But if you ever get to that point that you find you can't work in the industry, if you don't walk away, you will relapse.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Because at that point, you're using it as a safety blanket. This is my plan B when things fall apart, sort of thing.
And then here's how all this crap kind of wraps up into a nice ball. I've become the observer of what wines you like and how I can best serve you. I know what conversation to have, and I could have it tableside in about 20 seconds and get you wines that'll rock your world. And I don't need to taste them. I know who loves the big, intense Cabernets. I know what Parker represents. No wine system is wrong. It's just people in different perceptual worlds with different facilities and mental processes have designed. I know what people will align best to Jancis Robinson's recommendations or to Gary Vaynerchuk or whoever it is. And so that elevates me in my sense of hospitality because I'll have a conversation with the individual. I will understand what's driving, and I will ask questions like, do you want to stray far? You want to go on an exploration, or do you want something comfortable that you'll love? And when somebody says, oh, I'm having this hot, spicy dish, instead of, sweet Riesling pairs best with that, I actually know that there's a source for the hot, spicy. Do you know anybody that carries their own hot sauce?
Oh yeah, my wife.
Oh, no kidding. All right. Yeah. She loves salt more than you?
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Ask her about the tags. Ask her about the artificial sweeteners. All right. So this is why you guys have a battle over the thermostat also, because it correlates to which temperature related world you live in. She has a really cool thing where when she gets the hot, burning, spicy, it fundamentally gives her an orgasm. You don't know this, she doesn't know this, but it burns even more for her than it does for you. But then it triggers a neurotransmitter dump of dopamine and endorphins and adrenaline into her bloodstream, and it hurts really good. Just like it does with runner's high is the same phenomenon, sadomasochism, interestingly. And if you don't get that, you can't imagine how they could enjoy that. And she doesn't want the burn put out. You do. So you have your goddamn Riesling, then let her be on her own to explore. She might, I don't like Cabernet, but I'm getting more of this Harry Met Sally moment, and whatever. So if you don't understand it, how do you make a recommendation? So there you go.
Right. Tim, MW. There you go. Hey, Tim, thank you for taking the time today. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely a pleasure, Andrew. Thanks for reaching out.
My listeners, where can they find you, or what are you up to these days? Anything exciting?
Well, let them know. Hang on a second.
Sure.
If you want to read more about the background, this is the book that I published. It's about 12 years old now, but fundamentally all still done. My cell number is 707-337-0327, and my email is tim@timhanni.com, tim@timhanni.com. So let me know and Google me in the word asshole, and you'll find all the people who don't like me.
I will actually include all of those in the links in the show notes, except for the Googling him and the word asshole. So thank you, Tim.
You're very welcome, Andrew.
Thank you for taking the time to listen today. If you enjoyed this, please leave a review, like, share. The more people that we can reach, the more people we can help and the more people we can bring this message to, a message of hope and possibilities in the service industry. Everyone who listens, thank you. You are my people. Keep rocking on and have a great service. And please come back and listen again. We send out new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. How about that? All right, see you soon.